The mirror and match options here on the pose and motion tools extend the tool set, giving it a whole new range of power and flexibility that allows you even more freedom in the ways that you use and reuse poses and motions. First of all, notice that these options only apply when you are pasting or loading a pose or motion, has nothing to do with copying or saving, much like the channel selection options here. Poses and motions are always copied or saved as they are, and they are either pasted in a mirrored, matched or unmirrored, unmatched state. So let's see a simple example here. I've just got the default blank scene, camera and light. I'm going to take my light there, copy its pose, check mirror and then click paste, and we get this set mirroring dialog appear for us. This allows us to mirror in a few different ways. First of all, if we're using items that have side naming, then we can use that, but for the minute we'll look at that afterwards. The other options here allow us to select which channels will actually be mirrored, since mirroring a pose or a motion is simply about inverting the values on certain channels. Now here the light is just in normal scene world coordinates, and so to put it on the opposite side means inverting its X, and also of course to turn it so as it's facing the mirror direction of itself means inverting its heading. These are the default options as they are the most commonly used. So we'll click OK and we see that our light's pose is mirrored there for us. As pointed out, because the pose is stored in an unmirrored state, you can uncheck it, select something else, go straight to paste, and of course you get that original pose pasted back in there. Something that you need to be aware of when using these mirror tools is of course the layout of the actual items that you've got. Specifically, this is most important when you're dealing with hierarchies. For instance, here we have some bones laid out in a hierarchy, which could be something like a pair of character arms coming off a body or whatnot. And what's important here is to know how their individual spaces and local axes differ from one another, which can be completely different from rig to rig based on things such as the parenting that you've got in place or pivot recording and things of that nature. You need, of course, to know what channels are going to be needed to be inverted when you mirror a pose, as there is no way for the pose and motion tool to automatically know, as of course rigs can be constructed in a number of different ways. If we take a look, for instance, here at these bones, we can see that when moving them in positive X, they go in opposite directions. When moving in negative X, also opposite directions. Y, however, are matched, so forward in Y for one is the same as forward in Y for the other, and of course Z is also matched, so forward in Z for one is forward in Z for the other. This is pretty common. This is why the default option in mirroring, of course, is to have X inverted, because that is normally what you would want to have. If we look at rotations, we see that we've got a similar story here. Pushing the heading, either positive or negative, has an opposite motion effect on each item here. The pitch is not so, and so of course when moving them to the same amount in pitch they do mirror one another, but bank is again also inverted here. So let's take a look at a just simple pose that we've got on this hierarchy there. We'll select all of the items, we'll copy their pose, come out to another frame here, choose mirror, click paste. Of course we're not using the sides option here, and we've got X heading and bank now selected, click OK. And what we get is this. Now this may seem unusual, and it doesn't of course look like a mirror of this pose there, again assuming that we were thinking of this in terms of a pair of arms, but of course remember that what we've got here is direct item to item matching. So what we have done is inverted the pose on each bone onto itself rather than mirroring it across between the sides, because of course we haven't looked at the side tool yet. And of course if we actually look at the hierarchy here in Scene Editor, it isn't set up in a sided sort of way. We can of course still get this to mirror correctly, and it comes down to our item selection. So if I select this sort of body bone there, and then 2, 3, 4 bones like this. I can copy their pose, come out here to another frame. I will now select that body bone again and the 1, 2, 3 other bones there, which are the opposite side. Choose paste without sides option, X heading and bank. Click OK. We've now got that result come in. Let's go back to frame 10. Since we've already mirrored the pose for that, we don't need to do it again. So we'll click 1, 2, 3 for these guys, copy their pose, of course select the opposing 1, 2 and 3, come back out to our paste frame there, hit paste, once again mirror the selected channels, and there we go. So this is a sided sort of hierarchy, but we've got no siding set up for it. But by using a multiple stage copy paste process, we can still mirror the pose properly by inverting the correct channels from knowing which ones need to be done for the way that the hierarchy has been set up. We can see, of course, that this works perfectly fine for motions as well. So of course here's our light that we saw before doing its little movement there. We'll switch to motion mode, copy that motion, just grab the whole range there, grab the camera, turn on mirror, click paste. Once again, we're not using sides, we are using X and heading, and when we click OK, we see that what we have is, of course, the perfect inverse of the light's motion on the appropriate channels, and we have got a mirrored version of the animation. Had we wanted, we could perhaps have tried something else, like inverting the Z as well. That would give us, of course, a different result because we have inverted an alternate channel here. Not always so easy to see on the item motion in viewport, but of course if we look at the two graphs we can see that that is indeed what we have. So in addition to trying to use this tool when you're actually wanting a mirror of an existing pose or motion, you can also use it as a pose or motion inverter if you're wanting to be able to take the values of a single pose or a keyframed motion from one item and have another item do the exact opposing motion on the same channel. Here then we have an example to illustrate the sides option in mirroring. You can see that I have two lights here, each doing their own little motion like that, and to help differentiate them, one is a distant whilst the other is an area light there. You'll notice that these are named right light and left light, so these lights have a naming prefix. So let us select them both, choose motion, copy, we'll copy the whole range here, turn on mirror and click paste. We can now see the mirror sides option. When this is checked, motion that was on any item beginning left something will be copied to the same right something, as we saw with the name matching on the bones example. Notice, of course, that it is asking for a left and right prefix. However you have got items named, whether they're single items like this, a hierarchy of bones, whatever, the left and right identifiers must be a prefix. They must come at the beginning of the item name. Beyond that, they don't have to be left and right. They could be any old rubbish that you want for the prefix naming to be, but they must be clearly identifiable from one another. But in this case, we've got the defaults left, right, and we're going to turn off channel inversion here. What we can see is that when we click OK, we've repasted the motion, and we can see that what was left right is now following right light's motion and vice versa. We see them do their little crossover there. If we come out a bit further again, we'll paste. This time we will turn on the inversion for the channels as well, and what we see this time is that left light is doing right light's thing, but it's doing it in reverse, and similarly right light is doing left light's thing in reverse. Of course, since this is just values on items being inverted and turned, then like other parts of the pose and motion tools, we're not limited to single items or the kind of simplistic things that we've seen thus far. And so setups like this that we're more likely to want to use the tools on, character rigs, are of course also perfectly doable. You'll see that we can select our items here, and whilst we do have left-right named items, we also have these singular items like the head, the spine and the hip root control there. which do not have any kind of siding to them. In the case where we do want to mirror such a pose, so we can copy it, come to mirror and paste it, we would still use the mirror sides option, and of course that will correctly mirror the left and right prefix named items, whereas those items that have no such prefix, in this case the head, spine and the root item, will just be mirrored as if they were singular non-sided items, as if we had not used the mirror sides option. So here we've got the sides on, we're doing the X, the heading and the bank for this fella, click OK, and there we see our pose is mirrored across our character like this. This of course is not a rig-it rig, this is just a standard rig as you might build in Lightwave using the regular rigging tools. When it does come to rig-it rigs, we do however have very much the same sort of tools available to us, except they're somewhat simplified when mirroring poses and motion. This of course is because the animation toolbox knows and understands the structure of a rig-it rig. So we can select a piece of the rig and make sure that we are in rig-it rig selection mode there, or one of the parts modes if we were choosing to work on parts. We can copy the pose or motion, select our other character or another point in time, choose mirror, and when we click paste, we're presented with this simpler option. In this case, we're mirroring across an axis, either X, Z, or X and Z. In this case, we'll choose X, and we see that the pose is mirrored across. Left becomes right, right becomes left, and anything that was pointing left points right, and vice versa. In this case, the X in question is the local X of the rig's total global space, as we see here on its global root item. If we look at the other options, we see that of course we've got the Z option here. If we click that, then the pose is mirrored across the Z axis. And you'll notice that in mirroring it across the Z axis like this, it is effectively rotated the pose 180 degrees. Notice here that his left foot is forward and his right foot is up in the air. If we look back at the original pose that we copied, even though it's pointing in the opposite direction, it's still the right foot up in the air and the left foot forward. We have effectively just rotated the pose through 180 degrees here. And of course, what we have with the third option there, the X and Z, gives us of course the rotation through 180 degrees, but with mirroring on X as well. Of course, this works perfectly well on motion, so we can have one rig-it rig like this, take its motion, we'll just copy that here starting at frame 1, leaving of course the rest pose on frame 0 alone. Come over to our other character, choose mirror, paste it, and we'll just do it on X, and we see that as well as the retargeting, we've got a mirroring of the motion there like this. Of course, you can use this with parts, so if we were to select these two parts here, choosing mirror, and in this case just pasting them right back over the top of themselves, mirroring on X, then of course we're able to transfer motion from the left arm to the right arm and vice versa. Also, of course, just like before, if we were wanting to transfer from one to the other, then we could just select parts in order like this, treat them as general items, copy their motion in the range, select those on the other side in the same order, choose paste, no need to use the mirror sides here, and mirroring on X, heading and bank, and that would give us a twinning mirror copy like this.